Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here for this impromptu conversation. Impromptu as it might be, it is still incredibly important as we're speaking to an issue that is significant, profound for everyone in the state of Minnesota. Anyone who's watched 2 seconds of the news or kept their eyes open know that we are in a moment of profound crisis where we are struggling to make sense out of what is happening to us in the state of Minnesota because of decisions made by the federal government. I'm talking obviously about the presence of ICE throughout the state and some of our sort of collective struggles trying to figure out what exactly they're doing and why they're here. One thing that has been missing from a lot of that conversation is the consequences of some of these actions on the whole state, and more specifically on agriculture. So today, farm leaders have come together to discuss the consequences of our current crisis on agriculture and in greater Minnesota. Now, something that you probably are all aware of is that 1 in 5 jobs in the state of Minnesota has something to do with agriculture. Agriculture is a quarter of our GDP. It is incredibly important to the state economically and in terms of who we are as a people. The current crackdown is having a tremendous economic and existential consequence for the agricultural economy and for farmers themselves. There are just now 3,500 H-2A visa recipients in the state of Minnesota doing agricultural work legally in the state of Minnesota, who some are afraid to come to work. Now you might say, should they be afraid or should they not be afraid? That doesn't matter. Reality, the truth, the actuality of the situation that we have right now is that the current situation is having a tremendous economic consequence throughout the state, but especially hard on our farmers. Farmers who were already struggling to have labor help. Farmers who are already struggling with commodity prices that are not behaving the way they should are now having to contend with having no labor and no consumers to do their businesses and to run their farms. That's a problem we haven't been talking about enough, and today we're going to talk about it. So we're going to start off by hearing a little bit from our friend Senator Rob Kupec, Vice Chair of Agriculture, Senator from Moorhead.
Thank you, Senator Putnam. Thank you all again for being here. This last year has been a very difficult year within the agricultural industry between tariffs, animal diseases, storms that have taken out grain bins and we don't have holding capacity while we're waiting for trying to export things and we don't have the capacity to do that. We've had severe cuts to federal funding, and now we have ICE agents who are roaming around the countryside, causing disruptions through the ag industry. We're facing even more disruptions as those federal agents move through. A lot of the focus has obviously been on the Twin Cities, but there are ICE agents all out into rural areas, including up into parts of my district. A healthy, thriving agriculture economy depends on the work of immigrants and guest workers that are here legally. A vast majority of those people doing this work, not only are they here legally, but they're afraid to go to work because they may just get picked up. And we have seen numerous instances of legal people being picked up, detained, shipped off in some cases to faraway places, and you know, at times facing down people with guns. So the trauma that goes with that they just don't want it, they just want to avoid. We've also seen the impacts of local businesses where restaurants have closed down, afraid for ICE showing up at those locations. Even in rural areas, we've seen that. We've seen working around in the Pelican Rapids area where there's a large turkey processing plant that ICE has been very active in that community, and those people are afraid to go to work. People who are there legally, who just don't want to get caught up in this net that's being cast out there, clearly just not done in any kind of strategic way or thoughtful way, and they're just rounding up people off the street. That is not the United States that we have known for 250 years. It is so counterintuitive to what our founding fathers thought this country should be about. When you read through the Declaration of Independence and you get to the part of the list of grievances against King George, go read that section and see if it doesn't match up to what is happening in this country right now. With that, I'd like to introduce Gary Werdish, President of Minnesota Farmers Union.
Thank you, Senator Putnam and Senator Kupec, for arranging this and organizing this. And as Senator mentioned, my name is Gary Werdish, and I serve as the president of the Minnesota Farmers Union. which is a grassroots general farm organization representing farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. The actions of the immigrations and custom enforcement in the Twin Cities metro have been making national and international new headlines, and their actions have generated a great deal of concern amongst our members. Members are concerned about the Twin Cities and their fellow Minnesotans. Some are worried about whether they can come into the region to make their food deliveries. Others wonder if what they are seeing on TV and social media is real. I know all of us have seen the video of a mother, Renee Good, getting shot by ICE agents. So I'll start by what might seem the obvious. What's being reported is real. It's causing chaos. It's traumatizing families. It's making us less safe, and it needs to end. Farmers Union, we work with restaurants in the Minneapolis area and other parts of the state. They're closing because they're workers. Even though they're legal, they're afraid to go out of their house. They're afraid to go to work. They're legal. Can you imagine any one of you, of us, being afraid to go out of our house? This week, members are increasingly concerned about ICE's operations in greater Minnesota, and we're hearing about actions that don't respect our constitutional rights. We are hearing increased reporting from members and in the news about ICE activity in rural communities across the state. ICE is targeting individuals indiscriminately, creating a culture of fear not just in the metro, but also in rural communities. This results in people, including those that are legal U.S. citizens, feeling like they need to hide in their homes in order to remain safe. They fear showing up to work, to hospitals, to work in nursing homes, and even to school. I'll repeat, kids don't feel safe going to school. It's already bringing life for some families and in some rural communities to a halt. To state it plainly, this is wrong and unjustified. The surge we're experiencing needs to stop now. You know, growing up in a rural community, I grew up in a rural community, I still live in a rural community, and going to a rural church, we were taught to always respect and help our neighbors and others. It didn't matter what side of the tracks you lived on or what color your skin was. Farmers Union has long been part of pushing for comprehensive immigration reform. Central to that work is the rule of law and having a fair process, but we are not seeing that now. That is why today Minnesota Farmers Union is joining the others here to call for an end to the surge of ICE agents in Minnesota. We must return to the rule of law, and that includes respecting local law enforcement and allowing BCA to do their job. Our leaders should be working to strengthen rural communities and help address the crisis in farm country. This surge is not the solution. We still do not have a farm bill, but I saw its budget more than triple. All of our congressional representatives need to stand up for Minnesota, the rule of law, and basic human decency. With that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Andrea Pablo.
Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you to Senator Putnam and Senator Kupec and Gary and Farmers Union for their leadership in speaking out. I'm Andrea Vabel. I serve as Deputy Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And food and ag has always been a cornerstone of Minnesota's economy. It's what made Minneapolis the mill city, the flour milling capital of the world. It's why we're home to companies like General Mills, Cargill, and Land O'Lakes. Ag and food generate over $105 billion in sales annually and support more than 388,000 jobs across the state. Immigrants are a critical part of this labor force. According to the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, approximately 1 in 5 workers in Minnesota's food manufacturing industry is an immigrant. The USDA census shows us that 27% of farms in the state rely on hired labor. While the exact percentage of that group that is immigrant labor can fluctuate, foreign-born workers play a critical role on our farms. Let me be clear, we would not have the safe and abundant food supply we're used to if it wasn't for our immigrant neighbors. That's why we're seeing the actions of ICE and other federal agents is so alarming. This isn't about identifying and detaining criminals or those in the country illegally. It's about fear and it's about intimidation. That fear and intimidation is leading to immigrant workers, both documented and undocumented, staying home due to fear of raids. Farms and food processing facilities then struggle to find enough labor. Shortages in labor lead to higher production costs, which economists warn will result in increased food prices for consumers. None of us live in a bubble when it comes to our food supply. The actions being taken by the federal government across Minnesota will eventually have an impact on all of us at our local grocery store if this continues. This is devastating to our rural communities and the vitality of our rural towns. The safety and strength of our food and ag businesses remain our priority, and that does not change depending on the color of your skin. We demand ICE leave now. Thank you.
We'll open it up for questions.
Any questions?
You guys have examples, recent examples of ICE going out into rural Minnesota and specifically on farms?
Oh, I think we can talk about any kinds of specific episodes. Just earlier today, Commissioner Peterson told us a story about two individuals who were working at a farm who were here illegally, who were afraid to go to Casey's to get lunch because of an ICE presence had been there just prior, a few moments before. So obviously that's anecdotal, but keep in mind this is stuff that's happening kind of in real time, very, very fast. And I know that in some circumstances people are saying things like, well, is it real? You're just making this up. Is this true? It's true, one, and two, what is equally true is the fact that people are genuinely experiencing this anxiety and this fear. This is about fear. Real cops don't wear masks. That's just the way it works. And in greater Minnesota, frequently, as Gary was kind of suggesting, you have a relationship with law enforcement. They're local cops. You know the people who are policing your community. That is not the case here at all. This is not a typical or reasonable law enforcement activity. It is one that is designed for fear, thus the masks. And the mystery and the lack of coordination with local law enforcement, so that you can talk to your local sheriff out in the rural area and they have no idea where ICE is. That's part of the plan, is that ubiquity. They could be anywhere, which means they're everywhere. And that has, I think, infiltrated, quite rightly, the psyches of so many people working in farms throughout the state of Minnesota. Does anyone have something better? She has a real answer.
No, that's a good answer. I'll also just remind folks that in terms of agriculture, the food supply and the food supply chain it's not just farms. So we're talking grocery stores, we're talking food processing facilities, we're talking meat processors, we're talking about dairy farms. We're talking about a large amount of institutions and entities around the state that the food supply is part of. So certainly we're hearing it on farms, but also all over the place. It is, you've seen the videos of Target and other places. That's where people go get their food. This is a real-time part of all of agriculture and the food supply chain.
Well, we noticed a couple incidents in Wilmer, video, for example, but I'm also wondering if perhaps by virtue of this surge happening in winter, maybe not as impactful to farmers.
Well, it's going to make a difference on the type of farm operation you have. There's no doubt about that. But it's having an impact, and it's happening so fast. There's probably things out in rural that is happening actually on some farms that we aren't even aware yet, haven't made the news, because it's in and out, and we don't. As Senator Putnam says, there's no interaction with the local police enforcement, so they have no idea a lot of times. So a lot of this is still coming out. It's just surge throughout the whole state.
Gary, are you hearing some people, farmers who are looking ahead and thinking, is this going to impact my ability to find and recruit workers when planting season begins? Or are people already starting, sooner than people realize?
No, it will definitely have an impact, because I know of a number of farmers that hire H-2A workers to come in and, for the season to work, on a crop farmers. And yeah, they've had a struggle getting workers here on time anyway. And especially if you're planting crops, you get a short window to get their crop planted. And if that process is delayed even farther, they might get here when it's too late. So it's definitely going to have an effect on them. There again, we don't know yet, but it's certainly going to have an effect.
The estimates I've read, somewhere between 40 and 55% of labor on physical farms comes from undocumented immigrants. So I'm wondering, and the Trump administration has said that they want an all-American workforce. So I wonder what you would say to folks who agree with that and would like to see the undocumented immigrants, even the ones who have been law-abiding, not working
I just want to say that I appreciate that qualification or that bit of data, but they're also telling us it's about criminals, which it clearly is not. So the fear that one who is here legally or one who is here without documents, that fear is the same, and both of those people are staying home from work, and the business that employs them is struggling. And in terms of the seasons, yeah, the seasons might make it seem like this makes more sense now, but there's no sense to this at all. This isn't about seasons, it's not about governance, it's about ratings.
Yeah. Well, it still goes to the overall problem with our immigration system. We haven't made any progress in the immigration system, and you can blame both parties on that. It's been for decades. We've known about this problem and we don't address it. There's a lot of people, there's been reports of people just recently had a report of a restaurant owner in one of the suburbs that got deported back to his country and been here for 20-some years, and his children are legal, but he came here undocumented. He's still supposedly illegal, has never done anything wrong, part of his community, owning a business, providing jobs, and very much part of a business. Is that who we want to deport rather than fixing our immigration system? The focus should be on fixing an immigration system. There was bipartisan agreement last fall with Senator Lanford out of Oklahoma, a very conservative senator, was the lead author on the Republican side to get an immigration reform done. That hadn't been, its first major bill that would have addressed some of these problems got killed because the president he said don't pass. He wants this as a campaign issue. Well, he's in office now. Let's fix the damn thing instead of causing chaos through the whole economy.
Can you speak to, have you heard from Republicans in the congressional delegation about the ICE enforcement issue or about the USDA freeze?
We've heard mixed reports on the USDA freeze. There's some that we've heard a report from one congressional aide that said, no, it's not going to be that. But then again, you hear there's still confusion. I'm not sure if they're getting the whole story. And we haven't heard directly from, other than seeing some of the posts of more on the Republican side sticking up for what ICE is doing. And, that's unfortunate. You got to, as I mentioned earlier, a lady got killed. That's senseless. Let's fix this and rather than causing the issues they are facing.
Senator Kupec, how are the sunflower fields in Clay County doing? I asked because I used to work on them.
Sure. Well, the funny thing is for a long time, we moved away from a lot of sunflowers up in the Red River Valley. And it is actually a crop that we've been turning back to because of tariffs and commodity prices that have been really bad. We've seen a resurgence of sunflowers coming back. Right now, there are no sunflowers growing in the Red River Valley.
For the senators up there, how significant of an issue do you expect this is going to be when you return for session and heading into November?
So I am also, besides, I'm on the subcommittee that's been looking at federal impacts, and, it is, part of the problem is that anything that comes from this administration seems no plan, and it changes day to day, and trying to keep track of that and figure out what we're doing. I think, as a subcommittee, we've been taking a lot of testimony, and we've been hearing from places, particularly in rural Minnesota, particularly about rural health care, farmers who are not going to have access to health care anymore, rural hospitals that are already doing 10% of their billing is charity care. And so we've heard a lot about that. And I think as we go into the next session, we're going to need to be, and obviously this is not a budget session, but we're going to need to be cognitive, I think, of when we make rules and laws, we need to make sure that we are not going to do anything as a state that is going to even further enhance the problems that we are seeing all across the state from the impacts coming down from the federal government.
So I think it's a fantastic question. Obviously, legislatively, we have no jurisdiction to handle with these concerns primarily, but we are actually in our communities. Unlike Kristi Noem, we're in our communities and we know what's going on in them. And so part of our job, I think, is to stay in touch with our communities and make sure that everyone outside of them knows what's actually really happening. I think our primary responsibility right now is to document the truth and let people know what's actually happening in greater Minnesota, at the farms, at the meat processing plants. Because there's a lot of misinformation and confusion out there. There's deliberate confusion out there. And even though we can't do anything by passing laws, what we can and must do is make sure that the truth gets known.
Have you seen any data or evidence that this issue, ICE enforcement, is DFL voters and independent or swing voters in your district? Like, are you seeing people reach out or, on the campaign side?
You know, I would say that, and Rob can speak to this too from his experience in Moorhead, but I would say that this isn't just about ICE, but ICE has energized a certain kind of energy. But I'll be perfectly clear. This isn't a partisan concern. This isn't a DFL or a GOP issue. This is a human decency issue. This is a respect for your community and for your neighbors issue, which goes across blue and red. I always say that, and I believe this to my heart. You talk to anybody long enough, you'll find out they're purple. You just got to put in the time to talk to them. And right now, people are speaking up on their own, and they're saying no to what's happening to us all around. And they are not saying, I'm going to stand up as a DFL voter, I'm going to stand up as a GOP voter, but they are going to say, I'm standing up for my community, and this is unacceptable.
Sure, and I'll just add, and obviously, we've seen people that have gone out and demonstrated in, even in Detroit Lakes, they have a regular turnout of people who are concerned. I think when I talk to farmers, their thought is, I thought they were going after people who had done bad things here and we're going to take away the worst of the worst and leave kind of everybody else alone. And I know that, the new Americans or the immigrants or the H-2A people that I hire, they're not those aren't those people. So why are they not staying here? I mean, we have in Moorhead, Fargo, we are chronically low unemployment. We cannot ever find enough workers to come up there. We need some sort of immigration policy that brings that in. The only thing for my friends on the North Dakota side that have even increased the population of North Dakota has been the immigrants that have come to work there, because it's a great community to work. There are plenty of jobs. They're good paying. The cost of living is low. Our schools are great. It's a great place. And I worked for 15 years. I volunteered with Lutheran Social Services. My background's a meteorologist. My job with them, I volunteered as these new Americans came in. I would have to explain to them about the weather in Moorhead and Fargo, because they all were coming from someplace that was much warmer, and that's the most dangerous thing. And every time I talk about a blizzard, they'd go, okay, but if the buses aren't running and the roads are closed, how am I going to get to work? That was always their main question, is how do I get to work when that occurs? And you have to say, well, we do make exceptions when there's a blizzard. You may not actually have to go to work that day, but that's it. That was the work mentality of the people that were coming.
Last question.
Sorry.
Has there been any contact with who you talk to as far as on, DHS or ICE, or who do you talk to find out these answers? How long are they going to be there? And are they looking for anybody? Is there anybody you can talk to find out what's going on with them?
Just quickly, I think Andrea, probably Deputy Commissioner Valbo probably has a much more nuanced perspective on this, but we've been talking with the Commissioner and with the Department of Agriculture a fair amount, and one of the biggest challenges that I really wanted to underscore today is the absence of transparency and clarity. We just don't know, and in past administrations, I'm guessing that Tom could probably call somebody up and they would answer the phone, call him back and tell him what's going on. That's not what's happening here. And besides, they might tell you something today and change their mind tomorrow. It's incredibly difficult to have any degree of, not even faith, just basic level trust with the current administration, because there's almost deliberate obfuscation. We don't know what's going on, and they won't tell us, and when they do, they change their mind. So it's really hard to tell. But Commissioner Valbo might have more detail on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I would echo those same remarks about just lack of transparency. I think similar to our experience with USDA and the funding freeze, or whatever it is that they're calling it at this point, very do things like help fight foreign animal diseases. If we don't have that funding from the federal government, that affects our folks directly. So I think the lack of transparency has been very difficult for us to be able to operate in a way in good faith. And I also just want to put a finer point on the fact that, I think a lot of folks don't understand how our food supply works. And so when you take the folks that are milking our cows every day, several times a day, when you're taking the folks who are harvesting the specialty crops, when you're taking the folks who are staffing our grocery stores around the state, when you are taking those folks away, if nothing else, people being ripped from their families out into the streets isn't enough to get you to care about this, the food supply will be significantly affected if this continues the way it is. So I just want folks to understand that this affects you even if you don't think it does.
Sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yes.
For the senator, I'm wondering, another issue has been childcare, workers, childcare facilities not having workers, impacting parents. I know rural access to childcare, rural communities is already an issue. Are you hearing anything about that from constituents so far, about the impact there, and, staffing and other issues in childcare centers?
I am actually, and I've been, and Rob can speak next as well, but what I'm hearing about, not just with childcare centers, also with healthcare, with people afraid to go to doctor's appointments, with staff who work in hospitals and clinics also, being unable to go to these places. And the thing I think is incredibly important to realize is it's not like everything was Skittles and rainbows before this happened. We had plenty of challenges before, and now we're adding challenges. We did tremendous things in the state of Minnesota to bring down the cost of eggs. Now it's going to go right back up. And don't get distracted by cheap Venezuelan oil. You're still going to have to eat an omelet at some point. We've worked really hard to try and stabilize things and to make life more affordable for Minnesotans. And this surge right now is having the exact opposite effect and undoing a lot of the good that we did.
Sure, and I don't know specifically around child care, but I have met with, constituents who they are legal citizens of the United States. They do not want to send their kids to school, to just regular public school, because in our area, if it's just regular border patrol and they get detained, they're taken to Grand Forks, which is 80, 90 miles away, and sometimes they got to figure out how they're going to even get back from Grand Forks if they're just picked up and they're legal citizens just because they weren't carrying your documents around. That, nobody's stopping me. I have a passport. You're not supposed to actually carry your passport around, right? You keep it locked up in a lockbox so you don't lose it. So when you travel foreign, you could have it. And to the thought that people are having to, carry documents around just is the complete antithesis of what this country is supposed to be about.
Thank you, everyone.
I am next. I farm in LaSoar County.
I think we've seen each other around.